mine in very real ways, daily ways, flesh and blood ways that would work at informing every aspect of my life, including my political and civic involvement. You see, so much of my faith had been primarily about accepting a certain set of theological assumptions about Jesus, but suddenly I was compelled by this faith that it was calling me to follow Jesus. Formerly, my faith had been mainly alive in my mind. But this conversion, it stretched and it spread that aliveness all the way down into my heart, into my stomach and my guts. It went into my hands and my feet and all the way deep into the marrow of my bones. The second reality of my life at that time was that I no longer lived in West Michigan. Some of you know what I'm talking about. I was suddenly thrust into a world that was very, very different from this place. Very different from this place I grew up in and was so familiar with. Where brokenness was manifested in very different ways, and where the barriers and obstacles to human thriving were incredible and complex and had been completely hidden from me before. Well, during this time, I began to gain a deeper understanding of the impact many of the policies I had long supported were having on the lives of real people. I had largely just been unaware of it. My intentions were good. They were always good. But I didn't understand these other people, and I didn't understand their lives and the brokenness that they were enduring. From my perspective, in the context of a middle-class Holland, Michigan life, those policies made sense to me. But I began to see that the policies I had spent my life campaigning for were actually hurting real flesh and blood humans in other places. These policies were tearing families apart. They were oppressing people. They were chaining families to poverty. In this new expression of my faith, an expression that sought to lift the lowly, to break the chains of oppression, to release the captive, to feed the hungry, to care for the sick and the elderly, this faith began to inform the way I engaged my national and global community. And so it impacted my politics, and it transformed the way I thought about politics. You know, we've made politics this dirty word. And I think that's a shame, because politics is simply how we decide the way we're going to live together in community. That's pretty important. Well, eventually I left Washington, and with it I left the Republican Party. I became a political nomad, wandering without a tribe, trying to dig deeper into the issues I ever had before, to sort through what is beneficial and what is harmful, what restores dignity to humans and what depletes it. What acknowledges the image of God in people and what denies it. The beauty of being without a political tribe is that I was able to really, truly explore these questions without having to arrive at a particular partisan destination. I didn't know what to do, so I headed to seminary. Calvin Seminary. Yeah, see? You know what I'm talking about. Well, there was this terrifying aspect to being without a political identity, because I didn't have a roadmap on how to do this. I wasn't sure what the full implications would be. And I quickly came to see and feel how intertwined my social groups and church groups had been with the Republican Party. At times, I felt like I was drowning in a fight against the cultural current of the religious right that I had been so immersed in and was so powerful and so strong. I began to experience an underbelly of nastiness that even people who loved Jesus and who have loved me were capable of. I cried a lot. I lost a lot of sleep. examine every political issue in detail. Who's impacted in what ways? Who's repeatedly getting left behind and why? And to do so without being chained to that partisan conclusion. There is a great freedom in that. And you know this. Jesus, he lived with and among the least of those in this world. He ministered to them and taught them, as many of our churches in this community do so well, locally, on the ground. But Jesus, he also spoke truth to the powers that were oppressing them. He called out systems that favored the wealthy and the powerful and denied the poor an opportunity to thrive. And so it seems to me that we too have a responsibility to be involved in not only the work that needs to be done in our community, but also this hard work of truth-telling, of calling out injustice to the powers that be, even though this work might and often does cost us something. Sometimes it costs us relationships. Well, after seminary, my husband and I began planting churches. And this path eventually brought us back to Washington, D.C., now as a family with 4 children. And part of the appeal to us to living in Washington, D.C. was that we wanted our kids to build relationships with kids who were living in these very different realities. And this proved to be a really important and informative time for them. So after D.C., we ended up back here, and here we are in Holland, planting another church. But soon after moving to Holland, this man, his name was Donald Trump, and he was running for president of the United States, our country. I know, right? And during his campaign, he mocked disabled people. And during his campaign, he asserted that powerful men can do whatever they want to the bodies of women. And during his campaign, he ranked a female candidate's value based on her appearance. And during his campaign, he repeatedly made false, disparaging, and discriminatory remarks about immigrants, refugees, and people of color. And during his campaign, he made the assumption that poor people were lazy. And during his campaign, he was so obsessed with his own image, right? And the good people of Holland, Michigan, people who I know love Jesus, voted to put this man, Donald Trump, in what is arguably the most powerful position in the world. And I was so confused. And you know, my kids, they were so confused. Because in Washington, D.C., so many of their friends were immigrants and refugees and people of color. And they were beautiful. And this was confusing to them because so many of their classmates came to school hungry and on government assistance, despite having parents who worked over 60 hours a week at some pretty difficult jobs. And this was confusing because we had been working so hard to instill in our boys the importance of respecting women. And it was confusing because we've intentionally worked to celebrate differently abled people. And it was confusing because we were trying to teach our kids the importance of humility. And all these things we were trying to teach them, it was because of our desire to follow Jesus. That's what compelled us to teach and instill these values in our kids. But the good people of Holland elected to put him there anyways. And today we have this president, President Trump, and we have this Congress whose moral spine has deteriorated to a point where they can no longer stand up straight. And we're kind of in a mess. This Congress and administration have uncovered and exposed dark attitudes and values that this country still clings to. But we didn't want to know that it existed. But it's there. And today, even prominent Republicans see this, and they're working with us and with other organizations to take power the moral spine of their own party.
You know it's bad when a party is working hard to remove power from their own grip. But friends, before we can do this work of reconciling the world, before we can bring healing and wholeness and shalom to systems that are harmful and broken and chaotic, we need to name the brokenness. We need to look it straight on and name it. And so tonight, I'm given the difficult, less inspiring role of naming that brokenness. And I hope you squirm a little. I hope you're uncomfortable. I hope this hasn't become the new normal for you. Because we are all of us, fibers in the fabric of the character that we as a nation are. This is not who they are. This is who we are. So let's hold up a mirror and look at ourselves. In the United States of America, my country, we turn our backs on immigrants and refugees fleeing unimaginable violence and poverty in their home country. In the United States of America, my country, we rip terrified toddlers and teenagers out of the arms of their mothers and put worlds between them. In the United States of America, my country, poverty and inequality are on the rise. In the United States of America, my country, our educational systems rank near the bottom of developed nations. In the United States of America, my country, we have enslaved ourselves to the profiteers of war. In the United States of America, my country, people have to decide if bankruptcy is a price worth paying for health care. Yes. And while our health care is the most expensive, our country is the least healthy. So figure that math out. In the United States of America, my country, we throw people in prison for profit. In the United States of America, my country, our systems, legislations, and tax laws favor the wealthy and kick down those who are already at the bottom. In my country, racism continues to be discreetly and blatantly woven into our systems. In the United States of America, my country, we take food away from the outstretched hands of hungry children. In the United States of America, my country, the love of money and power and unlimited corporate campaign contributions has rotted out the foundational moral base of democracy. Collectively, this is who we are. And we're all a part of it, all of us. As people of faith seeking to embody the good news of the gospel in every corner of the world, in every sphere, we have the opportunity to be influencers. We need to pay attention to realities that are not our own. When the very least of those among us and outside of us, the ones the powers of this world so easily dismiss, are forgotten, Jesus calls us to wake up and speak up and step up and restore dignity to God's image bearers. And we ought to be convicted to actively shape the character of the nation we aspire to become. Let's do this. You know, leaving my husband and my kids and my life behind me for 5 weeks to do this thing. Living on this bus with these people who climb in together at the end of the day smelling pretty ripe. 12 bunk beds stacked like sardines in a small space. This is crazy. But you know, desperate times really do call for desperate measures. Crazy times call for crazy responses. And you know, the joy and the love and the wisdom of the Lord, it keeps us going. It keeps us going when the bus breaks down and we find ourselves dragging suitcases down a 4-lane highway somewhere in Ohio. And our desire for justice keeps us singing and lifting our feel like you're drowning when you breathe, when you take a breath. But ultimately, I'm doing this for my children. And I'm doing this for my children's children, and I'm doing this for the millions of children who have no voice in this world, and I'm doing it for your children too. Friends, as one who seeks to follow Jesus, I'm compelled to leave everything I touch a little bit brighter and a little bit kinder, and this includes the way we participate in our democratic system. In Holland, Michigan, you're the community that laid the foundation I built my life and my faith upon. This community, you value all the values that you all placed on Jesus. It impacted me. It took root in me, it grew in me, and this is a large part of why I am who I am today and why I'm doing this crazy thing I'm doing from now until the election. But we all have a thing to do. We each need to find that thing and pour ourselves into it. And so the Vote Common Good movement is made up of Republicans and Democrats and Independents. And we're seeking to embody the good news of the gospel in the public square. So I hope you can open your hearts tonight to our cast of speakers. They're amazing. They have good word for you. And we'll invite you all to join the movement as well. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but she made me feel very hopeful. This is a song I wrote about just feeling hopeful. How could we ever come to this, you say? Lives do not matter, and justice has no face. To study war and anger burns the fabric of our state, sends a message to our neighbors that we've fallen from the fray. It's a long road to walk home.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Mark Scandaret. I'm a husband and father and a pastor and a Midwesterner. I was born on a military base in Germany, and my family moved around to lots of different places in this country, but the Midwest is my home. And I married a Dutch girl. And I got to bring her to Holland, Michigan last year during the Tulip Festival, and we loved it here, so I'm really excited to be back. If you're not part of the dominant culture of a place, sometimes it can feel like you're sort of an outsider. And some of the first people I talked to tonight said they sort of felt like that. He said, I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't identify as a person of faith, but most people in Holland are people of faith. And I'm really confused at the difference between what I know is at the heart of the gospel of Jesus, and then the kind of opinions and postures that I see so many people in our community taking in terms of what they care about and how they vote. And I tried to explain what I think is going on there. And I said, as a child, I'm grateful that I learned to be a believer in Jesus. I learned to believe in the message about Jesus, his death, burial, and resurrection. But it took me a while to understand I was also being invited to be a follower of Jesus. That Jesus, this is not just a message about Jesus, but he had a message. And it was that the kingdom of God is at hand. And he said, I've come to proclaim good news to the poor, to give sight to the blind, to release the oppressed, and proclaim the year of God's favor on all people. And I remember reading those words as a college student and thinking, I don't think I grasped this part of what it means to be a Christian yet. And something began to happen, a flip began to happen in my life, where I'm like, I'm being called not only to believe in him, but invited to follow in his path, to become like him in this world, to seek the greater good that Jesus called the kingdom of God. So I want to share a poem with you that I wrote thinking back to that time in my life. And it goes like this. Lonely highways, dusty fields, flatland, Midwest humidity, my rust-colored AMC Matador barrels down the road towards justice, mercy, love. You leave home. To Jericho you roam, through fallow fields and winter's trees stripped bare, skeleton branches reaching for the air, and they are waiting for the sons and daughters of God to be revealed, waiting for the hands that will soothe and heal. And down that road, I see the Nazarene embraced as Rabbi and Messiah King. I see our desperation for substance become living abundance, loosening the chains of injustice, breaking the yoke of oppression, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, welcoming the weak. And we will no longer turn away from our own flesh and blood. We will be called repairers of broken walls and restorers of streets with dwellings. Yes, the road ahead for you and for me and for us together is a road toward justice, mercy, love. Amen? So, y'all are a really friendly, warm audience. This is maybe the best experience we've had on this tour. It feels like we're connecting. You've been also kind to be kind of spectators and participants in this, and in just a minute, I'm going to invite us to do something a little bit more interactive together. Using something that I was grateful to be able to participate in, something about the Beatitudes of Jesus. The last couple of years I've been in a global project where a group of us started to ask, how do we learn to actually live in the kind of life that Jesus invites us into? It seems like there's some instincts first instincts we have as human beings. We come out of the womb, and it's easy to feel anxious, worried, afraid, to compare ourselves to other people and feel like this world is about competition and us versus them. And this is why we need conversion and salvation and awakening. Because in our natural state, it doesn't lead to good outcomes for us and for us together. And so that's why Jesus invites us into these beatitude flips, to go from our first posture to a new way of being together. And so I'm going to invite you to consider one of those 9 new ways of being together tonight. I'm going to read a little invitation, and I'm going to invite you to get up and move around and talk to some other people. Jesus said, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What does it mean to be poor? Poverty is when you don't have enough, or you feel that you don't have enough. Something is lacking. This beatitude invites us to own that poverty. I'm going to invite you to stand up right now. And I want you to open your hands for a moment. Open both of your hands, look down at them for a moment, and consider these questions. Where in your life do you feel like you don't have enough, or you aren't enough? Where in your life do you feel like you don't have enough, or you aren't enough? When I think about that question tonight, the first thing that comes to my mind is I don't feel like I'm getting enough sleep on this tour. I'm averaging about 5 hours a night of sleep. I also sometimes think about, I don't know if I have prepared enough for old age after I'm too old to work. Have I saved up enough? I also think about the fact that I have a daughter with a disability. And I wish I could make her better. I don't have enough to help her. I'm going to ask you, I've done a little bit of vulnerability here, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. I want you to turn to one or two people near you and take about 3.5 minutes and respond to that question with your hands out. Where do you feel like you don't have enough, or that you aren't enough? I hate to interrupt a really good conversation. Let's keep talking, but talk all together. Turn back to the front and hold out your hands with me again. Thanks for taking a step to be vulnerable to maybe people you've never met before. Even the richest person on this planet doesn't have enough and is not enough. They're going to experience loss, sickness, and disappointment. Then they're going to get old and die. And so when we experience this sense of not enoughness, I think our first tendency is to close our hands. I'm going to invite you to close your hands right now. We tend to, when we get into the contact with this not enoughness, to grasp at whatever we can find. Squeeze your hands tight, to hold on to what we have and who we are, and to not share it. And we see this all around us in our world, and it's the cause of incredible inequality, competition, grabbing and greed, materialism, and the worship of wealth, and a mentality of more, bigger, and better. And I am guilty of that. It breeds anxiety, fear, and even desperation. Look down at your squeezed hands. How have you closed your hands? What are you holding on to tonight? How does it live to feel to live in this way. That's a posture of scarcity. But this beatitude is inviting us into a way of trust. You don't have enough on your own. And it's that independence that makes us feel like we live in scarcity. But what if we live in a world of dependence and connectedness? We didn't make ourselves, and we don't have to make it on our own. We're invited to open our hands, to trust in the abundance of a good Creator. How does it feel to make that release? To live in gratitude, satisfaction, and generosity. To share what we have with one another, and to see where that takes us. Blessed are you and me, the poor in spirit. For ours is the kingdom of heaven together. So today, let's own our poverty. Celebrate the reality of abundance. Walk in the way of trust together and live with open hands. So before you sit down, I'm going to invite you to take one step further with this. You've got those open hands. And as a symbol of what it might look like for you and I to go from this, to share with one another, I want you to turn to a couple other people and share a handshake or a hug and say, peace to you, brother or sister. Let's walk into the future together.
Continue to fellowship. I know that it's the presence of the Lord. There are sweet, sweet expressions on each face. Yeah. And I know that it's the presence of the Lord. Continue to fellowship if you like it. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, stay right here with us, filling us with love. And for these blessings, we lift our hearts in praise, and we know for sure that we have been by when we leave this place. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, stay right here with us, filling us with love. And for these blessings, we lift our hearts in praise. And 'cause we know for sure we have been by, 'cause we know for sure we have been by, yes, we know for sure that we've been by when we leave this place.
Well, that's me, a pace telling you about the sweet spirit. And it's my privilege to introduce to you the salty side of the night. And that's Frank Schaefer. And sometimes, come on up, Frank, and sometimes you're sweet. Just be met by a little salty. And Frank knows how to tell the truth. And Frank, we're so glad that you're here. Thanks for being with us. I know you sort of have to, but tell Frank that you're glad he's here.
Good evening, all of you. On the way in here, coming to do battle for our country, I met one of your local candidates, Jeanette Skipper, who was running for... Jeanette, you're in here somewhere. She's back there. Turn around and give a shout out to Jeanette. When I met Jeanette, I gave her a hug because these are tough times. It's like meeting someone on the way to being shot, so you just say hi. And I looked her in the eyes seriously, and I said, Jeanette, save us. And I mean that seriously. She's never run for office before. She's standing up. We're standing up. Who knows where this will end? But we are trying to save each other tonight. And we're trying to save our country. You know, someone asked me, have you been in this area before when I came in? And I had to smile and almost give them my talk and then say, no, I'll save it for you guys. Have I been in this area? Has anybody else ever sat down in Rich DeVos's office at Amway and walked away with a $250,000 check? I have. We're not talking about the religious right tonight. I am the religious right. When Gerald Ford became president, guess who was babysitting my daughter, Jessica, at our home in the Ministry of L'Abri Fellowship in Switzerland? Well, that was Mike Ford, who lived in our house for a year, along with his wife, Gail. And when we made the documentary film series and book called How Should We Then Live, which took my father, Evangelist Francis Schaeffer's ideas, and brought it to a big public on art and culture and philosophy, the company we worked with was Gospel Films in Muskegon. I spent 6 months of a Michigan winter next to the lake editing our film that became literally the foundation for the rise of the religious right, because the next movie we made with Dr. Siever Koop, who became Surgeon General with Ronald Reagan, was Whatever Happened to the Human Race, without which there would not be a litmus test on the issue of abortion. Today, when we look at Donald Trump, the reason he is president is not because of Russia, it is because of the white evangelical vote. That's the only indispensable part of his backdrop and background story. Without that support of people like Ralph Reed, who got into politics as a young man, when I sat down with him, along with my father and Pat Robertson and some others, and urged him to get into politics, without the issue of abortion, without the issue that we made into a litmus test, we would not be where we are today. So you're looking at one of those people who is somewhat responsible for the god-awful mess we're in. And the fact of the matter is, if we got in a time capsule back in those days, when my parents were staying in the White House, Gerald Ford asked Mom and Dad to come stay with them when he was president, put them in the Lincoln bedroom, and then Betty came down and said, don't sleep in the Lincoln bedroom, come on upstairs to the family apartment. My mother, Edith Schaefer, has to be one of the only people who, on regular visits to Washington, D.C., to stay with Jack and Joanne Kemp, Jack later being the vice presidential candidate with Bob Dole, would actually do this, and I crap you not, this is not fake news, would go up to the White House gate without any kind of an appointment or invitation or on the tour or whatever, and actually say, could you tell Betty I'm here and I'm really tired and could use a swim in the White House pool? And the guard would look at her like, okay, we have whatever the code would be, you know, we got a 6480 here, bring somebody. And then lo and behold, Betty would come tripping out of the front door of the White House and say, Edith, come on in. My nepotistic sidekick role of the religious right was that when my dad was dying of cancer, I would step in for him at the National Religious Broadcasters to 20,000 people the year that we brought Ronald Reagan on stage, gave a keynote there for my dad, who was at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and then giving the keynote address to the Southern Baptist Convention a year later, the year before my dad died, to 24,000 Southern Baptist pastors, and you remember that era, you've never seen such an ocean of blue polyester. And there we were, flying high and flying mighty. And when my dad died in '84, I got out. And I started an entirely new journey that wound up a couple of years ago when I wrote a memoir called Crazy for God, putting me in the New York Times when they did a portrait of me or a profile of me, and the headline was something like Traitorous Prince, and that was me, not Prince that went off and started war for profit, but just Traitorous Prince. And they talked about the fact that I came from what they called evangelical royalty. That's my family. And as a novelist writing books like Portofino, and as an author of what they call literary nonfiction, like my memoir, Crazy for God, and most recently, my book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God. And by the way, you can tell I'm not an evangelical anymore because I do not have a whole box of them out here to sell you now. And by the way, we earned more money on our book tables after the How Should We Then Live seminar tour than I make in any given year now. And I'm not kidding you, because the big bucks was in them thar God business hills. That's where the real money was. And that is no joke. So for me, knowing Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos personally, I have a signed copy of one of Rich's books at home where he signed it to me, to young Frankie Schaefer, who will be a great defender of Christianity and capitalism. I shit you not. I have that. And it's in my bookshelf. Coming from that background and knowing all these folks and having gotten out myself on the basis of the aesthetics, how can you spend your whole life in an environment of ugly hypocrisy when you're a younger man and have a choice? I found that coming home to my wife and my young children at that time, being in this environment was turning me into even more of a jerk than I am naturally, because I was kind of loathing myself because I no longer believed the politics and was beginning to ask questions about the theology. Fast forward to today, but I have a message for you. I knew Jay Van Andel, and I knew Rich DeVos, and Billy Zioli was a person who was kind to me. He bought me a couple good suits and gave me an American Express credit card and would fly me from Switzerland on first class. That was a cool thing for a young man who had gotten his teenage girlfriend pregnant when we were 17 and 18, which is why, by the way, I have Amanda, who is in her 20s here as my granddaughter, working on this tour. So there's a little of the evangelical thing left, because, you know, without a little nepotism, I just wouldn't feel at home. I mean, you gotta get family members on the payroll, right? That's what I learned early. By the way, I'm doing this not on any payroll. This is just me gratis. That's it, because I believe in what we're doing. But I want to tell you something, and that is, and I'm being very serious now. If you had taken Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos, if you had taken Billy Zioli, who was writing every morning, he would write a little memo to Gerald Ford when he was in the White House. He was kind of his pastor, sort of a cut-rate Billy Graham, if you like. If you took us from that period of time and fast-forwarded to now, and would tell these folks that the people who prided themselves on living in a way that would demonstrate the existence of Jesus as the Son of God, because you could see in their lives how they were following this person, this second member of the Trinity, and you would say, these folks will put in power a philandering liar who stands up at a public meeting and mocks a woman who says she was molested to the point of an attempted rape at age 15, and they will laugh, and they will jeer, and they will clap, and these are your people, Rich DeVos. These are your people, Jay Van Andel. These are your people, DeVos family. And one of your daughters-in-law is going to wind up being another sycophant enabler of this son of a bitch. This is who you put in power. They would not believe you. They would say, married 3 times, paying off a porn star, screwing around with Vladimir Putin. These were all anti-communist people who didn't trust Russia. They would say this complete turnabout is a hoax, they would call it. Fake news, they would call it. Because it would be unbelievable to them, in the same way that metaphorically there's that parable about the frog in the science experiment. You put it in water that's cold and cool and comfortable. You turn it up by 1 degree an hour, and pretty soon the frog is dead because you incrementally change that frog's environment to the point where you boiled him to death. That's where we are. The evangelical community today is no longer, when they support Donald Trump, they are no longer what could be called part of the Christian community in any historic sense. They are where Dietrich Bonhoeffer's church was in Germany, that went along in the 1930s with the fascist regime. And they're doing it for the same reason: greed, billion-dollar tax cuts for the super wealthy, calling on all the xenophobic, racist, reactionary, woman-hating, gutter part of all of our souls, me too and you too. Because there exists in each one of us a devil. And the whole business of being a Christian is to suppress that devil within and replace it with light. And we have replaced it with darkness. And what we have today is a community that is so obsessed with power and maintaining power, that they are following an obvious charlatan, an obvious con artist. And what we are doing on the road here with Vote Common Good is only one thing. We're not telling people to become Republicans. We are telling you simply this: elect people to all branches of government that can clip this man's wings. That is what we need to do. And I want to conclude with one last thing. And this is an actual conclusion. Again, not an evangelical conclusion that'll run into a third and fourth conclusion. This is the conclusion. If you think we're screwed now, just give this guy a majority in both houses. He's just turned the Supreme Court into a sycophant, enabling institution that will whitewash everything he does. He has all the branches of government now. If we don't have a Congress to oppose him, imagine what has happened in the last 2 years and extrapolate that out into the next level of unthinkableness. Children in cages, mocking women who have been raped, open season on minorities in this country, a vile, open hatred of women. That's where we're headed. And you only have one chance to stop him, and that's on Election Day in November, by putting people there who have the guts to oppose him. So I say to every Democratic candidate running, I say to you, Democratic candidate running, save us! That's my message to the Democratic Party. Save us! Thank you.
That
Yeah, that's Mia Prince and Nick singing Amazing Grace to the House of the Rising Sun. That's a pretty good night. Hey, I want to tell you a little bit about this tour that we're on. You know that we're traveling all over the country. This is stop number 5 for us out of 31, so we're just getting ourselves rolling. You probably asked yourself what this phone number is about down here at the bottom, and maybe some of you already took out your phones and texted the word GOOD to 239-360-4663. We'd love you to do that because we'd like to be in a little text relationship with you all. If you do that, it connects you with our website, keeps us in touch with you, and you in touch with us, so we would be thrilled if you would do that tonight. Now, I want to tell you that there are 4 things that propel us around this country. Faith. For a lot of us, faith in God, faith in this country, faith in the good people of this country. Hope that tomorrow is going to be brighter than it is today. Hope that what we leave for our children and others is something they can be proud of, and they can be proud of us. Love of one another, even in the midst of our frustration and our anger. Faith, hope, and love, the 3 things that remain. But there's a 4th thing that propels us around this country. You know what that is? Money. Diesel. Diesel fuel moves us around this country. We have 3 vehicles in our little caravan that's traveling around. A big old bus that says Vote Common Good on it, an RV that says Flip Congress on it, and a truck that pulls a mobile stage, because tonight we're inside the Knickerbocker Theater. Normally, we don't get to come into houses like this. We meet out on the streets, we're in public parks, we're in parking lots, we're taking it to the streets. We're getting out there just like a lot of our evangelical roots taught us, and bringing it to people that won't walk inside of private places like this. And because we come into places like this, we've got to rent them, which we had to do tonight. So we'd love for you to either help fuel us as we move across the country, and it costs like $350 to fill up our bus, $350 to fill up our RV, $300 to fill up that truck, to move this mobile stage so that we will set it up in 30 congressional districts around this country where we're supporting candidates, and we're asking people of faith that they would step out to support that. So I am not kidding you on this part. I know I'm a little bit of the fun guy here, but it really does mean a lot to us. If you went out to any of those tables out there and you were to make a donation either with a credit card or if you want to write a check, somebody reminded me, they said, they looked around the room, they said, oh, these are people that carry checkbooks with them still. Don't forget, don't ask them for cash. Tell them who to make a check out to. Vote Common Good. That's who you make a check out to if you want to make a contribution. Now, some of you are thinking, well, what's your routing number and what's your wire transfer number? We'd be glad to give that to you at one of the tables out there as well. Because some of you want to give tens of dollars. We'd be glad to have you do that. Some of you hundreds of dollars. Some of you want to say, hey, we want to write a check for a couple of $1,000s and pay for the rental of this place and this particular night. Some of you might want to even be more ambitious than that and stay with us all the way as we travel. It really is important to us. We have a bunch of people. We're traveling with 12 or 15 of us at a time. We're traveling all around this country. And the financial side of this, both to move our vehicles and also to make it possible, really is important. And we don't think Vote Common Good should stop on November 6th. We think this idea of asking people to vote for the common good ought to run through 2019. And you know what congressional candidates have to do? They have to run again in 2020. So we've got a long road ahead of us, and we'd love to take you on the road with us. But if you text that phone number, now it's starting to sound like one of those fun drives, isn't it? 239-360-4663. You text the word good to that. That'll put us in touch with you, and that's a great way for you to stay in touch with us. Now, as a Christian person, I happen to believe that every individual, including Bill Huizinga, is a child of God, fully beloved by God, the light of the world, and the salt of the earth, no exception, in the eyes of God. But every child of God should not be a representative in the House of Representatives. And there is nothing wrong with it. I am not a representative in the House of Representatives in this country, and I'm a beloved one of God, and I think Bill should be freed up to go and let his light shine, going off and doing something else. And no matter what Brett Kavanaugh tells you, no matter what the Brett Kavanaughs of the world tell you, certain people don't have a right to be judges and be our representatives. You have to earn it. Rob Davidson has said he wants to earn it. Rob, come on up. We want to invite you to tell us what you want to do.
Thank you, Doug. And before I get going, I know there are 2 candidates here. Is Doug Zylstra still here? Doug just left. Doug's running for county commission, was here, Democrat running for county commission here in City Holland, and Jeanette Skipper, who Frank recognized, but Jeanette's running for the state senate, 30th district state senate. Stand up, Jeanette. She needs your vote. She needs your vote too. I didn't see any other candidates that I knew of here. Oh, Garnett Lewis. Garnett, stand up. Where's Garnett? Oh, she had to leave too. Okay, she's running for state senate. Well, geez, thank you so much. I feel humbled to be invited on this stage. Had I known the list of speakers and the performances they were going to give us before I was going to come up here, I don't know if I would have been so easily convinced to come up on this stage in front of you. Because normally I have an event and it's me and I'm talking and people leave and think, wow, that guy's pretty good. We should help him out. So, boy, I've got a lot to live up to here. But the thing I love about having all these great people before me, especially Christy Berghoff, who's become a very good friend over the last year in this journey, like a lot of people. The thing I like about that is I don't always know what I'm going to say for 7 minutes when I have 7 minutes to speak to folks about why I'm running for Congress and why they should support me, why I'm different than Bill Heisinger, why I'm different in so many ways. And I love that I got to listen to all three of you, to Christy, to Mark, to Frank, speak your truth, because it informs me so much why I'm here, why I'm doing this, and it changes. You know, what is important to me is always the same, my bedrock, my foundation, but kind of how I got here and what informs me on a day-to-day basis is shaped by the people around me. And Christy, when you talked about raising your kids in Washington, D.C. with people of color, with immigrants, with refugees, with people working 60 hours a week and barely holding themselves together, it makes me think of empathy. That's a trait that I think is so important that so many people don't have, not being able to see the world through someone's eyes. When Mark had us open our hands, and I turned to my little quartet over here, the four of us, and I said, the thing that I feel like I may be lacking in is being a proper husband to my wife, Diana. And so I am a congressional candidate, that is true. A lot of you know me, I'm an emergency physician, and I love that, and I love doing that. And I'm the dad of three amazing kids, Mia, Sam, and Ava, who have been with me for 17, 14, and 12 years, and we were just looking at pictures from 10 years ago and amazed at how the time flies. But probably what I am more than anything and what has brought me to this place is I'm a husband to a woman named Diana Flynn, now Diana Davidson. We've been together since we were 19 years old. We've been with each other for 27 years, been married for 24 of those years. And she taught me three basic truths about what it means, what I think it means to be a representative. She helped me decide to be a physician, and those basic truths helped me to be a good physician, sometimes a great physician, sometimes a good enough physician. And I think they will help me to be a representative of the people. She taught me about listening. She taught me about empathy, which I think is important. She taught me about service. Without those three traits, I could not be an emergency doctor. I would not be working night shifts and weekends and every other holiday of my life for the past 20 years of my life if I didn't have those traits. Because when I go into a room with somebody that I've never met before, and they may be having chest pain, and maybe quite seriously, they may have a hangnail, and it may be something not so serious. For them, that is their moment. That is their emergency or their urgency, and I have to listen to them. I have to be able to empathize with them. When I ask the mother with a child with an earache at 3 o'clock in the morning, what made you come in at 3 o'clock in the morning? Because a friend of mine who's in one of Bill Heisinger's commercials recently, who's a doctor, complained about a family plan. That's what we call people when they come in with their whole family, a family plan. They came in after midnight and they didn't have to pay anything for their free care. And I asked this mother with a little bit of judgment in my head, why did you come in at 3 o'clock in the morning? And she said, we have one vehicle between 3 houses, and this is when it was ready. And I looked at her and said, you're one of the best mothers I've ever seen, because this is when you could bring your kid to the hospital, you brought your kid. And to have the ability to empathize with her reality, because I've never been a family with one vehicle among 3 households who could only bring that child to the hospital at 3 in the morning. I have the luxury of having my own vehicle. I have the luxury of living in a neighborhood where everybody has their own vehicle. And to have that empathy, to first listen to her, to have the empathy, and then to serve her, to do what is right for her. And this is what I feel is needed in our Congress. This is what I feel is lacking, is that ability to listen, to empathize, and to truly serve the people you're supposed to serve. what I learned, how I got into this, and many of you who know me know how I got into this. I got into this because of healthcare, because I've been an emergency physician for 20 years, and I've listened and I've empathized, but I found I was in the service of two masters. I was in the service of the individual before me, but I was also in the service of their insurance company that had a $10,000 deductible for that person who didn't want to get the test to diagnose a blood clot in their lungs because they couldn't afford $10,000 in their $30,000 salary. I was in the service of those two separate entities, and it didn't feel right. It was a conflict within me. So I went to a town hall last year. I addressed my member of Congress. We had a debate, and he wasn't listening to me. He wasn't listening to anybody in that gymnasium back in February of last year. And what I found was, what I heard from many people who addressed our congressman was that what he told them, the basic truth, that he represents the 62% of people who voted for him. And for me, you represent every single one of the 730,000 people who live in your district, and more than that, you represent the 320 million people who live across this country. Those are the people you serve. So when he stopped listening, when he wasn't listening to those people or to me, I decided I was going to run for this office, and I think that, and I've learned that over the last year and a half. I've learned going to doors, listening to people, calling people on the phone, having events, going to public forums and listening. I've learned so many people's truths when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, when it comes to their wages, when they're working 60 hours a week just to hold things together, and they just can't seem to do it. And I've learned that in order to represent these people, I have to understand where they're coming from, and I have to truly be able to serve them. I believe our congressman is in the service of somebody. My concern is that he is in the service of the powerful, as Frank talked about. The very powerful that write $10,000 checks at the drop of a hat and then get a tax bill handed to them that only serves the very, very powerful and leaves everybody else behind. So what I'm asking you is to trust me that I will always listen, and that I always do my best to empathize with whatever reality comes before me from my constituents, from the 730,000 people that I represent. And I'll always try to act in the service of all of those individuals. And that is all I can promise you. I can't promise you a bill. I can't promise you an act. I can't promise you Donald Trump or Brett Kavanaugh will no longer be president or justice of the Supreme Court. Because I am there, I can promise you that I'll listen, I'll empathize, and I will always act in service to you. So I thank you so much, and I have to do this because my campaign manager back there told me I had to. One thing I need you all to do for me in the next 29 days is to go to people's doors and listen to them. When people have someone from the campaign or myself come to their doors, they're amazed. They get to have conversations and have someone hear them. So if you are available in Holland any Tuesday through Friday, 5 to 9 p.m., Saturday 10, 1, and 4, Sunday 12 and 3, or in Spring Lake this Saturday at 10, Sunday at 2, Georgetown Township Saturday at noon. See Tori in the back table. That is what you can do for the next 4 weeks of your life to make sure that we bring this truth to Washington, D.C. We bring real representation back to the people of the 2nd District. So thank you very much.
Holland, you're beautiful. My name is John. I'm a writer and pastor from Raleigh, North Carolina. You've heard a lot of wisdom tonight. I'm going to try to give you something to leave here on. I have been traveling this country for the past 8 or 9 months, and I get to fly a lot doing that, which for many of you that would be good news. It wasn't good news for me because I'm not that strong a flyer. Right? There's something that happens when I'm on the plane and I realize that I'm on a large metal tube hurling through space and I become uneasy. Right? But recently I was flying to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm having a really good flight for someone who's sure he's going to die in an airplane. Right? I'm there wedged in my little elementary school sized chair, right? Got my Barbie doll sized bag of pretzels, got my Dixie cup of soda, got the earbuds in, and I'm enjoying myself. But my enjoyment is interrupted by a voice. It's the voice of the pilot. I know this because he says, folks, it's the pilot. He says, I want you to return to your seats. I'm going to ask your flight attendants to stop service. I'm going to ask you to put on your seatbelts. We're about to hit a little chop. Hear that word he said? I knew that word. And he went on to talk about weather systems that were approaching, and he said it again. He said, it's going to get a little choppy. And I knew what choppy meant, right? Choppy is airline speak, is pilot speak, for we are about to be shaken like a snow globe in the hands of an angry toddler. Right? Choppy means I'm about to contemplate my mortality one more time while wedged between two strangers. Right? Choppy means I'm about to make a lot of promises to God on what I'll do if we land safely, none of which I intend to keep. But the pilot, in his very matter-of-fact way, was giving us a message. He was saying, hang on, turbulence is coming. And in the Bible, Jesus is talking to his disciples, to his students, to people that he loves, and he's going to be leaving them. And he's trying to encourage them. And he says, I'm telling you these things because in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome it. Jesus is telling those who would walk in this world in the ways of compassion and mercy and love and justice, hang on, turbulence is coming. So Holland, I've come here from Raleigh, North Carolina to give you a message. Hang on, turbulence is coming. Actually, I'm a little late, aren't I? Turbulence took the earlier flight out, November 2016, right? These are times of great shaking, aren't they? This is the most turbulent moment in this nation that I have been alive for. Right now, Muslim Americans are experiencing turbulence. Migrant families are experiencing turbulence. LGBTQ couples are experiencing turbulence. Young men of color are experiencing turbulence. Lovers of the environment are experiencing turbulence. Survivors of sexual assault are experiencing turbulence. Good people who have compassionate hearts are experiencing turbulence. I think that's why you're here, right? I think you felt the shaking. See, it's exhausting to give a damn, isn't it? Right? Yes. To wake up every day and try to have compassion in times when compassion is in such great demand, right? To wake up every day and push back against predatory politicians and corrupt systems and toxic legislation and acts of treason and leadership failures in the church and presidential tweet tantrums. To wake up every day and push against the velocity and the relentlessness of that, it can wear you out. Have you noticed? I've noticed it, right? Because you're carrying it all. The systemic ills, the political realities, and the individual stories of people whose names and faces you know, stories that you're a part of, right? All those things, they sit upon your shoulders and they reside in your clenched jaw and in your elevated heart rate, right? And they reside in the knot in your stomach that returns every morning when you check Twitter, or you turn on the news, or you walk out into your community, or you walk out into your living room and you see how much demand there is for someone of empathy, and you are that someone, and that's why you're tired. And so it's in this time, friends, this time of relentless urgency, this time of relational isolation, this time of national fracture that we gather here today. And I don't know why you're here, but I think you're here because you're one of the damn givers, amen? Whether you're an activist or a minister or a caregiver or a parent or simply a responsible citizen of the planet, you feel the heaviness of these days and you are burdened to do something. And see, many of you here are Christian, and I think you understand how I feel. As a Christian, I feel profoundly disoriented lately. I feel spiritually nauseous. And see, we've never met, but I think I know you. I think you know the disorientation, don't you? I think you walk away from conversations with people you used to trust for wisdom and love and compassion and something that looked like Jesus, and you no longer recognize them anymore. I think you feel estranged from friends and families and coworkers and former pastors and people you work and live alongside. And I think you wake up and about 100 times a day you ask the question, has a huge portion of this country lost its mind, or is it me? Good news and bad news, Holland, it ain't you. See, the fact that you realize this is good news for what it says about you, but it's bad news for the place and time in which you find yourself, right? The fact that you are so disturbed by this means your faculties are intact. It means your mind is fully right. It means your heart is working properly. It means you still have a soul, doing what souls are supposed to do, keep you deeply human in profoundly inhumane times. This is why if you're pissed off, rejoice. See, in times of turbulence, there are two kinds of people. There are the peace givers and the fear bringers. And we as Christians, we need to be the peace givers, and we have to oppose the fear bringers. See, these have been turbulent days, haven't they? But you know what? Despite how stomach-turning it's been, despite all the word lines I've acquired and all the sleep I've lost and all the grieving I've done and all the chocolate and wine I've consumed, and despite all the expletives I've let fly, I still have hope today. See, I have hope because I look out in the world and I see the damn givers are still at work. I see them today. Look around you. The damn givers are filling up this room. That's reason to celebrate. People ask me how I keep going. It's because of what I've seen in the middle of this turbulence. I've seen ordinary people engage the political process and run for office for the first time in their lives, right? I've seen ordinary people like you leverage your social media profiles to say stuff that you always wanted to say and now you know needs to be said, and people don't like it. I've seen Muslim bans fail, healthcare repeals be defeated, states defying presidential decree. I've seen millions of people march in solidarity with oppressed communities. I've seen millions of people march in shared outrage. I've seen thousands of people in progressive churches and women's groups and civic gatherings and humanist conferences and interfaith services all speak with the same language, all saying this enmity and this hatred, this is not who we are. This is not the America that we are going to leave for our children and their children. It's upside down, but we're going to make it right. I know we are. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was in the parking lot of the church there, and we were there for memorial service for the Parkland victims. And I remember we were there to grieve. We were there to mourn the loss of life. We were there to lament violence that seems to be ever increasing, right? We were there to mark that tragedy, and so there was a heaviness befitting the day, but there was something else. It's what you feel tonight. There was this pushback against the darkness. And middle school and high school students spoke that night, and they spoke prophetically. They spoke powerfully. And as they spoke, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and tears filled my eyes because I saw something else other than the terror, other than the hatred, other than the anger and the bitterness. And a young man stood up and he said, really happy to be here today. I'm not happy because of why we gather. He said, I'm happy because I woke up today looking for hope. And he scanned the crowd. He said, and here you are. In 1871, Unitarian minister Theodore Parker spoke these words. He says, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, right? You may have heard those words. Martin Luther King echoed them in 1958 to a nation that still could not figure out how to treat people equally. He said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And those words have been spoken as solace in times of adversity, as a coping mechanism against despair. But I want us to say those words tonight as a battle cry of warriors for the common good. I want us to realize that this place and time where we find ourselves, yes, the arc of the moral universe does bend towards justice, but we're going to give it a little nudge. See? We who occupy this space and time in the history of the planet, you and I who are here right now, we have to realize that the arc never bends without us. It never has, it never will. Humanity is the irresistible force shaping the crescent that we stand on together tonight. Every single life, every single infinitesimal choice, every seemingly unimportant decision adjusts the path of that arc in ways we can't even imagine. That arc is bending in the time that it takes me to say this and the time for you to hear it. The world is changing, either becoming more or less loving and compassionate and decent. And this is why we're here, because every single moment is a movement one way or the other. Friends, this means we are the arc benders. We are the ones to do this work. We're not passive participants in the difficult days in which we find ourselves. We're mighty co-authors. We are people who can make a redemptive mark on this planet, and we can change the story that is being told. I want you to think of a child right now, a child you know. One of your children, grandchildren, someone, a neighbor. Think of a child whose name you know. When you get that name, think of that name. On the count of three, I want you to say that name. 1, 2, 3.
There.
This is why you do what you do. This is why you live and breathe. It's why you speak and struggle and push back and pray and resist and engage. Because every time you do, the world bows and bows a little bit more. But listen, not just that child. Not just the child you know, but a child down the street from here, and one 50 miles from here, and one 500 miles from here, and 5,000 children whose names and faces you won't know, people you'll never meet, people who aren't even born. This is why we do what we do. The arc of the moral universe is long, and we may not see all the movement we wish to see while here, but make no mistake, it will bend far less severely and more slowly if we simply wait for it. Amen? See, and while we're waiting, other people might decide that we've bent too far toward equality and diversity and love and justice, and they might arc their way from the progress we've made. I think we see this, and so we have to be diligent and relentless and steadfast in these moments, or we risk losing all that the people who came before us have built. See, we stand on the shoulders of arc benders. There were people who came before us who said, I'm going to push back, I'm going to leverage my voice and my resources and my gifts and my breath and my vote. I want to be an arc bender. I want to live a life leaned toward justice. I want my choices in the small and the grand to contribute to the holy momentum in this planet. I want this place to be more compassionate and more loving and more decent and more just than when I arrived here. And I want to leverage my privilege and my abundance to be spent on those who have less of those things. I don't know what matters to you, but you need to figure out what matters to you. And you need to find a hill worth dying on, and you need to take it tonight. See, if you liked what happened in this room, it doesn't matter. If you love what happened in here and you do nothing outside of this room, we've wasted this whole night. You need to leave here with a burden, and you need to follow that burden into all the places it takes you to. We have to have a love that is defiant and a faith that will not falter. See, in these days of great shaking, friends, you and I, we need to become the turbulence. We need to become the turbulence to the fear bringers. We need to become the turbulence to those who broker in hate. We need to be the turbulence to those who would discriminate against someone based on their color, their sexual identity, their orientation, their life stage, their nation of origin, anything about them. We need to be the turbulence to those who would use the faith of Jesus to do damage to people made in the image of the God we serve. I stayed with a friend named Rod, and he lives in Northern California, wine country. Has a beautiful house, lined with windows, view of the rolling hills there, and I remember sitting in his house thinking, wow, I don't deserve to be in this spot. But see, it wasn't the house, and it wasn't the view that was the star. It was my friend's hospitality. He made me feel loved in a place that I had just arrived in. And my friend Rod lost his home in the wildfires this year. And I talked to him just an hour or so after I found this out. And he said, John, it was crazy. He said, I was awakened at 2:15 in the morning, and we saved what we could, and we left, and it all burned down. And Rod said those words, we saved what we could. Friends, this is your calling. This is your burden. This is your job description when you leave here. So you can't change everything. You can't change who the president is. You can't change who's on the Supreme Court. But you can make some trouble for them. You can create some turbulence for the haters and the racists and the bigots and the power holders. We've done all we can to give you something to leave here with, and I pray you leave it. I hope you're disturbed tonight. I hope you're angry. I hope you're ready to just go out and alter the planet, because that is who you are. That is why you're here. Blessed are you. Blessed are the arc benders. Blessed are the dam givers. See, I came all the way from Raleigh, North Carolina, looking for hope. In Holland, there you are. Be well.
gets hard and it gets dark out there. But one way to not give up, one way to keep going is to think about your neighbor, to think that there are people that have less than you, people who are weaker than you. So keep going, and we ask that you please don't give up. Please don't give up, 'cause we need you now. We need you now. Please don't give up, 'cause we need you now. We need you now. Now I need you to help me with this. So if you could stand to your feet right now and think about your neighbor. I want you to give yourselves a round of applause. And I want you to think about your neighbor. I want you to think about continuing to keep going. And I want you to put your hands together and help me sing this song. Please don't give up, 'cause we need you now. We need you now. Please don't give up, 'cause we need you now. We need you now. Please don't give up, 'cause we need you now. We need you now. Please don't give up, 'cause we need you now. We need you now, right now. Thank you.
At Vote Common Good, we're committed to the following actions, and we want to invite you to join us in these commitments. Number one, we will vote in the 2018 midterm elections, not merely for personal, group, or party interests, but for the common good, because we're all part of something larger than our own lives. We will vote with the poor, vulnerable, and forgotten in mind, with religious, racial, and gender minorities, with children and the elderly, with the sick and diversely abled, upholding the God-given dignity of all people, no exceptions. We will vote with peace and safety in mind, and we will oppose policies and politicians who believe that more weapons and more threats of war will bring peace. We will vote with God's creation in mind, the oceans, rivers, and streams, the mountains, the valleys, the farmland, the atmosphere, the delicate balance of nature, and all our fellow creatures. We will vote against policies and politicians who promise special privileges for any religion, including our own. We will vote for politicians who support laws against corrupting influence of corporate and special interest group donations on our political system. These are the commitments of Vote Common Good, and we invite you all to join the movement, because we cannot do this alone. Everyone is needed. Every voice must rise up and demand better from our leaders.
Now, we promised you we'd take you till 9 o'clock, and we want you to spend the last 8 minutes of our time together doing a couple things with us. One, we're going to invite a pop-up choir up here in a minute, so if you want to be part of the pop-up choir, we'll invite you to come up right now. And you don't have to be pre-signed up for that. You just want to join this whole thing up here, but you're welcome to stay out there. We're also going to invite you to stop at those tables out there. You can stop at Rob Davidson's table and get signed up with him. Get signed up to go to some of those places and knock on some doors. Well, we're busy in here knocking on heaven's door. Somebody's got to be going around knocking on the neighbor's doors. So it's a good thing if we do both of those. So get yourselves out there. Stop at any of those tables. We'd love you to take home a hat, a button, a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, and tell people what's up. We'd also like you to share this with other people around the country. I want you to raise your hand if you know people in any of the places that we've been or where we're going. Did you know anybody in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania? Anybody know someone there? How about Lancaster, Pennsylvania? Raise your hand, hold up. Thank you, keep that hold up. You're gonna be up for a little while. Did you know anybody in Asheville, North Carolina? Did you know anybody in Greensboro, North Carolina? Do you know anybody in Morgantown, West Virginia? I won't even ask you about Holland because all your hands are up. Do you know anybody in Minneapolis, Minnesota? Do you know anybody in Sioux City, Iowa? Do you know anybody in Des Moines, Iowa? Do you know anybody in Kansas City? Do you know anybody in Omaha? Do you know anybody in Wichita? Do you know anybody in Dallas? Do you know anybody in Austin? Do you know anybody in San Antonio? Do you know anybody in Houston? Do you know anybody in El Paso? Do you know anybody in Las Cruces, New Mexico? Do you know anybody in Escondido? Do you know anybody in Simi Valley? Do you know anybody in Fresno? Do you know anybody in Bakersfield, California? Because we are going to all of those places. And that's just 31 of the congressional districts in this country, and you know people, and we'd like you to invite them to come out to our events, we'd like you to invite them to come out to the polls, we'd like you to stay in touch. That's why I want you to put your name on that phone number, because we're going to stay in touch with you and get you connected to people all over the world, because you all are part of something. None of us started on this land. All of our people came from somewhere else, and we all know that our people took it from other people. And that's something that we all have to reconcile in this world, what we're going to do with the stolen lands. But while we're on this land, we have to decide if we're going to let this be the land of everybody else and let other people make the decisions, or if this is going to be your land. So if you want to be in the pop-up choir, come on up. We know that all the Vote Common Good people are going to come on up here. Remember that, Vote Common Good people? Come on up here. And if you think you're a Vote Common Good person, come on up. We'll invite all of you up here. We're going to do a couple refrains of This Land Is Your Land. Yeah, there you go. This is like an altar call at a vaudeville house. This is like how you do an altar call at a vaudeville house. So come on up here. Come on, Pice. You were around when this whole thing got started. Come on up here. We're going to teach you to do this last refrain, and then we'd like you to hit us out the line.